Danish mink farmers are stuck in limbo after an order by the Danish government to exterminate the country's entire mink population has been deemed illegal. Millions of animals have been killed over fears that the mutation found in a mink could hamper efforts to deploy a vaccine globally. Morten Buttler reports from Copenhagen.
Danish mink farmers have slaughtered millions of animals after the government issued an order to cull the country's entire mink population of over 17 million animals.
The past week has been quite a brutal week for mink farmers in Denmark. On TV, we've seen farmers, big grown men, burst into tears to see their life's work vanish in front of them.
Danish government ordered the exterminations amid fears that a mutation of coronavirus detected in the animals could hamper efforts to develop a vaccine.
Der I dag konstateret coronasmitte på 207 minkfarme.
That order has since been retracted after the government had to admit that there was no legal basis for it.
So the government can order the culling of mink at mink farms that are contaminated with COVID-19, but they can't, under the current legislative framework, order the culling of healthy mink. So right now, opposition politicians are complaining that the government is trying to kill healthy mink and breaking the law. And meanwhile, while the politicians are debating this, farmers are culling mink, millions of mink as we speak, while they're waiting for the government to decide what's the next step.
Denmark is the world's biggest producer of mink fur, and the National Fur Breeders Association now estimates that 2/3 of the country's mink population is dead.
So the process is that they give them anesthetics and then they gas them and they potentially burn them later on, and then they bury the remainder of their bodies. So far, because of the pace that this has been affected by, we've seen some mink being alive in this process. We've seen dead mink falling off trucks on the highways. So this process so far has been brutal and not a particularly pretty one.
Aflivningen af mink i de 7 kommuner i Nordjylland går hurtigt. Jeg vil gerne gentage min og regeringens store medfølelse over for alle jer og alle dem, der står i en svær situation, fordi dyrene desværre skal aflives.
Some of these mutations that we're seeing with mink could potentially, in the worst case scenario, pose a risk to global vaccine efforts. So this is the main concern for health officials in Denmark, and also the government, who fears that they will be the next Wuhan.
No clear consensus has emerged in the scientific community around whether the Danish did indeed overreact.
First of all, it's a bunch of animals out there that we have contact with that are in dense populations in farms that will act as a reservoir for this virus. So let's say a vaccine comes on board. The majority of people have been vaccinated, but a few don't want to take it. Here you've got a way for the virus to continue circulating and get back into people over and over again, and it just prolongs the outbreak. So that's one big issue. And then the other big issue is, it's not an issue right now, but there is a concern about the way that having this virus replicate in a different species might drive it to evolve in a different way. And we could end up with a different strain of virus eventually that's either less able to infect us or more able. But it is not an issue so far. There's no evidence yet, from what I've seen, that this virus is more lethal to people or is changing in a way that will avoid a vaccine. But it's not a good thing. We need to deal with this sort of problem quickly and stamp it out before it really takes off.
The Danish government has now presented a law proposal that would ban mink farming until the end of 2021, raising questions around how the industry will survive.
So the focus right now is to cull the potentially sick mink, and then at a later stage, once legislation has passed, the plan is still from the government side to cull the remainder of the total mink population. Now, if you ask the Prime Minister, she'll say that it's not the intention to shut down the industry long term, whereas if you ask the farmers and Copenhagen Fur, which represents the farmers, they would say that this is the effective death of the sector.
That was our Morten Buttler in Copenhagen. Thanks for that report.
The biggest stories the moment they happen from around the globe. Subscribe to Bloomberg Quicktake now for insight in an instant.